The stars shone brightly against the deep black of space as the research vessel glided silently through the outer reaches of the Zalarian system. Inside the small ship, Commander Vexatal adjusted his viewing lens and sighed. This was his 5th expedition to the abandoned moon base this cycle, and his fellow scholars at the Academy were beginning to whisper that his obsession had clouded his judgment. Vexatal didn't care. He knew what he was looking for, even if no one else believed him. "Approaching landing zone, Commander," said his pilot, a young Zalarian named Kiv, who had volunteered despite the warnings from his teachers. "Atmosphere readings match previous visits. Safe to proceed." "Thank you, Kiv. Begin descent procedures." Vexatal gathered his equipment, triple-checking his collection tools. If he was right about the signals his instruments had detected on the previous visit, today might finally bring proof that humans had been real. The ship settled on the dusty surface of the moon with a gentle hiss. Through the viewport, Vexatal could see the crumbling structures that had once been some kind of outpost. Who had built it? For what purpose? The official Zalarian Science Council position was that it had been constructed by the Matari, a species known to have explored this region before their mysterious extinction 800 years ago. But Vexatal knew better. The materials, the design, the strange symbols that matched no known Matari dialect. All of it pointed to the truth that no one wanted to acknowledge. "Remember, Kiv, we have 6 hours before we must return. The radiation levels are still within safe limits, but exposure should be minimized." Vexatal sealed his protective suit and checked Kiv's connections. "Yes, Commander, though I still don't understand why the Council won't send a proper research team. This place is a treasure of archaeological importance, regardless of who built it." Vexatal's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture of sad agreement. "Politics and fear, young one. If I'm right about who made this outpost, it challenges too many comfortable beliefs." They exited through the airlock and stepped onto the moon's surface. Low gravity made their movements bouncy despite the heavy equipment they carried. Vexatal led the way across the gray landscape toward the largest structure, a half-collapsed building that might once have been a command center. Inside, dust covered everything. Their lights cut through the darkness, illuminating fallen beams and broken technology. Vexatal moved carefully through the rubble, following the readings on his scanner. "The signal is stronger today," he said, his voice hushed with excitement. "This way." They pushed deeper into the ruins, past rooms filled with unknown machines and strange furniture sized for bodies unlike their own. Zalarians had 6 limbs, and stood barely half the height suggested by these accommodations. "Commander," Kiv called out suddenly. "Look at this." Vexatal turned to see Kiv pointing at a wall where their lights had revealed a faded image. It showed bipedal beings standing together, wearing uniforms with a strange symbol, a circle of stars surrounding what looked like a planet. "Document everything," Vexatal ordered, his heart's beating faster. "This is exactly what we're looking for." They worked quickly, scanning and photographing the image before continuing deeper into the complex. The signal led them to a sealed door, its locking mechanism still operational despite centuries of abandonment. "The power source must be remarkably durable," Kiv noted, examining the panel beside the door. Vexatal connected his device to the panel, running decryption algorithms he had developed based on patterns found in other ruins. After several tense minutes, the door slid open with a groan of protesting metal. Behind it lay a small room untouched by time and the elements. In the center stood a pedestal, and on it, a glowing crystal. "By the first light," Vexatal whispered, approaching slowly, a memory crystal intact. Memory crystals were rare artifacts capable of storing vast amounts of data and, according to legend, actual experiences. Most existing crystals belonged to known species and contained scientific or cultural information. But this one, is it human? Kiv asked, the word coming out almost as a whisper, as though speaking of forbidden things. "Let's find out." Vexatal carefully placed a containment field around the crystal before lifting it from its pedestal. The glow pulsed gently in his hands, as if acknowledging his presence. Their return to the ship was quick, both scientists eager to examine their find in better conditions. Once inside and free of their protective gear, Vextel connected the crystal to his analysis equipment. "Beginning primary scan," he announced, fingers moving across his control panel. "Data structures are unlike anything in our records. Definitely. Not Matari, not Zalarian, not any known species." The screen filled with strange symbols and diagrams, ship designs, star maps, and text in an unknown language. "Can you translate any of it?" Kiv asked, leaning forward. "Not yet, but look at this." Vextel highlighted a recurring symbol, the same circle of stars they had seen on the wall image. "This appears consistently throughout the data. I believe it's their identification mark." Hours passed as they worked, the ship's computer gradually decoding small portions of the vast database. Names began to emerge, dates, locations, and most importantly, specifications for vessels of war unlike anything in Zalarian records. USS Franklin. Vextel read aloud as the computer translated one file. "United Spaceship. A military vessel. Commander," Kiv said slowly, "if humans were real, and if they had this kind of technology thousands of years ago, then the stories might all be true." Vextel finished for him. "The Great War, the sacrifice, everything." The ship's communication system suddenly beeped, indicating an incoming message from Zalara Prime. Vextel opened the channel to see the concerned face of Counselor Mirazen. "Commander Vextel, you are ordered to return immediately," she said, without greeting. "The High Council has convened an emergency session." "Has something happened, Counselor?" Vextel asked, surprised by the unusual directive. Mirazen's expression was grave. "Our deep space monitors have detected multiple objects entering the outer system. Large objects, Commander. Moving at speeds our sensors can barely track." Vextel felt a chill run through his body. "How many objects, Counselor?" 37 at last count. And they're on a direct course for Zalara Prime." She paused, her voice dropping lower. "Initial analysis suggests they are vessels of some kind, vessels not matching any known design in our records." Vextel looked down at the crystal in his hands, its glow seemingly brighter now. "I'm on my way, Counselor," he said, "and I'm bringing something you need to see." As Kiv prepared the ship for immediate departure, Vextel stared at the data still flowing across his screen. One image captured his attention, a rendering of a massive ship, its hull marked with the star circle and strange lettering. The computer's translation appeared beside it. "United Earth Alliance Diplomatic Corps. Humans were real, and after thousands of years they had returned to Zalarian space." Vextel didn't know whether to feel vindicated or terrified. The ship lifted off from the moon's surface, accelerating toward home as alarms began blaring throughout the Zalarian system. In the darkness of space beyond their scanner's range, something massive had just appeared at the edge of their territory. The myths were awakening. The legends were taking physical form. And Vextel wondered if Zalara was ready for what was coming. Captain Alan Kelly stood on the bridge of the UES Intrepid, his eyes fixed on the blue-green planet displayed on the main view screen. After years of deep space exploration following humanity's return to the stars, this was their first contact with an advanced civilization. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. "Report, Lieutenant Wright," he said, breaking the silence that had fallen over the bridge. Lieutenant Samantha Wright looked up from her sensor station. "The planet has approximately 17 billion life forms, sir. They appear to be a spacefaring species with colonies throughout their system. Technology level is similar to what Earth had 3 centuries ago." Kelly nodded. "Have they detected us?" "Yes, sir," Wright confirmed. "Their orbital stations changed alert status as soon as we entered their system. They're scrambling what appear to be defensive vessels, though nothing that could match our capabilities." "Standard procedure," Kelly said. "First contacts were always tense affairs." After humanity's long absence from the galactic stage, they had learned to approach new civilizations carefully. "Any response to our greeting message?" Communications Officer Nathan Ford frowned at his console. "That's the strange part, sir. They're responding, but their messages contain multiple references to the return and the ancient ones. Almost like They were expecting us. Kelly exchanged glances with his first officer, Commander Diana Pierce. Her usually stoic expression showed a hint of surprise. "That's not possible," Pierce said. "According to our records, Earth has never made contact with this sector before." Kelly tapped the arm of his command chair thoughtfully. "Records from before the isolation period are incomplete. Our ancestors might have visited this region during the first expansion. The isolation period had lasted nearly 2,000 years, after Earth had mysteriously withdrawn all its forces and settlers from the galaxy. Historical records from before that time were fragmented, with large gaps that scholars still worked to fill. Only in the past century had humanity ventured back to the stars." "Sir," Ford called out, "I'm receiving a direct transmission from what appears to be their planetary government. They're requesting permission to send a delegation to meet with us." Kelly straightened his uniform. "Permission granted. Prepare the meeting room. Commander Pierce, assemble a welcome team." "Yes, sir," Pierce replied. "Request permission to include Lieutenant Wright and Officer Ford. Their expertise might be valuable." "Granted." Kelly turned to his tactical officer. "Lieutenant Mason, maintain alert status. I want security teams on standby, but keep it discreet. We're here in peace, but let's not be careless." Mason nodded, his hands already programming the security protocols. An hour later, Kelly stood in the Intrepid's main docking bay as the Zalarian shuttle completed its landing procedures. The ship was smaller than human vessels, with an elegant, curved design that suggested both beauty and function. "Atmosphere is compatible with our own," Wright reported quietly, scanning the shuttle. "Slightly higher oxygen content. They should be comfortable without assistance." The shuttle's door slid open, revealing 3 figures. Kelly had studied the preliminary biological data, but seeing the Zalarians in person was still striking. They stood about 5 feet tall with slim bodies and 4 arms. Their skin had a faint purple tint and 4 large eyes dominated their faces. They moved with grace despite the ship's gravity, which was slightly stronger than their homeworld. "Dira," lead Zalarian stepped forward, clutching what appeared to be a data device. "I am Vextal, Commander of Historical Sciences for the Zalarian High Council," he said through a translator. "This is Counselor Mira Zen and Chief Defense Coordinator Trelzar." Kelly bowed slightly. "Captain Alan Kelly of the United Earth Alliance. Vessel Intrepid. Welcome aboard. This is Commander Pierce, Lieutenant Wright, and Officer Ford." Vextal's eyes blinked in sequence, a gesture Kelly couldn't interpret. "Captain, forgive my directness, but I must ask, are you human?" The question caught Kelly off guard. "Yes, we are human from Earth." All 3 Zalarians seemed to vibrate with excitement or possibly fear. It was hard to tell. Mirazen stepped forward. "For thousands of years, we believed humans were merely legends," she said. "Stories to tell children, myths of powerful beings who once traveled the stars before vanishing." Kelly exchanged surprised glances with his crew. "I assure you we are quite real, Counselor. We have just discovered proof," Vextal said, raising the device he carried. "An ancient outpost on our outer moon. Data crystals with records of human presence in this sector long ago." Pierce leaned closer to Kelly. "Sir, this might explain the gaps in our own historical records." Kelly nodded slowly. "Counselor Mirazen, we would be very interested in learning what information you have about our previous presence in this region. And we have many questions about where you have been all this time," Trelzar said, speaking for the first time. The military officer's tone carried suspicion. "Your arrival coincides with disturbing activity at the edge of the Void Zone." "The Void Zone?" Ford asked. Vextal's expression grew solemn. "A region of space beyond our borders that has been quarantined for as long as our records exist. According to our most ancient texts, it was humans who established the quarantine and warned all species to avoid it." A chill ran down Kelly's spine. The timing couldn't be coincidence. "Perhaps we should continue this discussion more comfortably," Kelly suggested. "We have a conference room prepared." The group moved through the ship, the Zalarians looking around with unconcealed wonder at the human vessel. In the conference, Room Vextal connected his device to the display system. "This is what we discovered today," he said. The screen filled with images of ruins, then technical diagrams of what was clearly an old Earth vessel. Its markings showed it belonged to the pre-isolation fleet, the USS Franklin, Wright read from the designation. "Yes," Vextal confirmed, "and according to the data crystal we recovered, it was part of a defensive force positioned in this sector to protect against something called the Swarm." Kelly felt his blood run cold. That name wasn't in any of Earth's remaining historical records, yet it triggered something deep within him, an instinctive reaction he couldn't explain. 3 days ago, Trelzar continued, our deep space monitors detected unusual energy signatures from the void zone. Yesterday, those signatures intensified. Then today, your fleet appeared at our borders. "You believe these events are connected," Pierce stated. "Are they not?" Mirazen challenged. Kelly looked at the ancient ship diagram, then at the faces of his crew and their visitors. Something important was happening here, a connection between humanity's forgotten past and its uncertain future. "I think," Kelly said carefully, "that we have much to learn from each other and possibly very little time to do so." Outside the ship, more vessels from the human fleet were taking position in Zalarian space. 37 ships in total, dispatched to this sector based on strange readings from Earth's own deep space monitors. Readings no one had been able to explain, until now. The grand hall of the Zalarian Historical Archives stretched far underground, its crystal walls lined with countless data storage units. Vextal led the human delegation through the maze of history with growing excitement. After years of being mocked for his theories, he now walked beside the living proof that humans were real. "Our archives go back nearly 5,000 years, Vextal explained as they moved deeper into the facility. Most species keep their own records, but as a central hub for trade in this sector, Zalara became a natural repository for historical data." Captain Kelly looked impressed. "Earth lost many of its oldest records during the isolation period. We've been trying to piece together our own history for centuries." "Then perhaps we can help each other," Vextal said. "Because according to our archives, humans once played a crucial role in this part of the galaxy. They reached a secured door at the lowest level. Counselor Mira Zen placed her hand on the scanning pad, and the massive door slid open. "The ancestral vault," she announced. "Our most precious historical artifacts are kept here. Few Zalarians ever see this place." Inside, the room was dimly lit to protect the ancient items. Display cases contained objects from dozens of species, some extinct for millennia. Vextal moved confidently to a section near the back, where a large viewing station waited. "I've spent my career studying the human myths," he said, activating the station. "Most believed they were just stories, but I found too many consistent details across too many cultures. The same descriptions, the same events, appearing in the histories of species that never contacted each other." The screen lit up, showing star maps and ancient battle formations. Lieutenant Wright stepped closer. "These ship configurations, they match old Earth military patterns." "Yes," Vextal confirmed. "According to our records, humans controlled nearly a third of the known galaxy approximately 2,000 years ago. Then came what our histories call the Great Darkness. Images flashed across the screen, planets burning, fleets engaged in massive battles and strange shifting forms that seemed to consume everything in their path. "The Swarm," Captain Kelly whispered, the name again triggering that strange feeling of recognition. Vextal nodded. "A hostile entity unlike anything seen before or since. It consumed entire worlds, growing stronger with each conquest. Conventional weapons barely slowed it down." The images shifted to show massive evacuation efforts, billions of beings from dozens of worlds fleeing as human ships formed protective barriers around escape routes. Humans positioned themselves between the swarm and the evacuation corridors, Mirazen continued, her earlier skepticism replaced with solemn respect. They moved entire populations to safety while engaging and holding actions against overwhelming forces. Commander Pierce studied the tactical displays with a professional eye. These were last stand formations, designed to buy time, not to win. Exactly, Trelzar said. According to our records, humans knew they couldn't defeat the swarm conventionally, so they developed a different strategy. The display showed a massive fleet of human vessels forming a perimeter around a region of space. They established a containment zone, Vextal explained. Using technology we still don't understand, they created a barrier that the swarm couldn't penetrate. Then they positioned themselves as guardians of that barrier. And then they disappeared, Officer Ford said, connecting the pieces. That's why Earth isolated itself from the galaxy. Vextal's 4 eyes blinked in confirmation. The last human transmission received by any world in this sector came from Admiral Eleanor Bennett of the Earth Defense Force. It said simply, "The containment holds. We will stand watch. Tell them we kept our promise." Captain Kelly felt something stir in his mind at the name, a fleeting sense of recognition that vanished as quickly as it came. After that, no human ships were ever seen again, Vextal continued. Over centuries with no contact, many began to question whether humans had ever existed at all. Their sacrifice became legend, then myth. Wright was downloading data to her pad, her fingers moving rapidly. These dates align with the beginning of Earth's isolation period, but our records never explained why we withdrew from galactic affairs. Because the knowledge was too dangerous, said a new voice from the doorway. Everyone turned to see an elderly Zalarian enter, supported by a walking staff. His skin was paler than the others, and his movements slow but deliberate. "Hi, Elder." "Zivor," Mirazen said with surprise, bowing deeply. "We did not expect you." "When myths walk into our world, old ones like me take notice," Zivor replied, his voice surprisingly strong. He approached the humans, studying them intently. "I am, perhaps, the only living Zalarian who still believes the full truth of the ancient records." "What truth is that?" Kelly asked. "That the swarm was created specifically to target humans," Zivor said bluntly. "It was engineered to be drawn to human neural patterns. That's why your ancestors quarantined themselves from the galaxy, not just to guard the containment zone, but to remove the very thing that attracted the swarm in the first place." A heavy silence fell over the room. "If that's true," Pierce said slowly, "then our return could reawaken what has slept for 2 millennia, Zivor finished. "Yes." Trelzar moved to another console and brought up recent sensor readings. "The activity we detected in the void zone, what you call the containment zone, began 3 months ago, shortly after your deep space exploration vessels first entered this sector. The implications hit Kelly like a physical blow. We led it straight to you." "Not intentionally," Vextal said quickly. "You couldn't have known." "We need to warn Earth," Wright said urgently. "If the swarm is attracted to human neural patterns, our settlements, our colonies, are all potential targets." Kelly agreed grimly. "Officer Ford, establish a secure channel to Alliance Command immediately." As Ford left to execute the order, Vextal moved to a small case near the viewing station. He carefully removed the memory crystal found on the moon base, now housed in a protective container. "This may help," he said, offering it to Kelly. "The data within seems encoded specifically for human minds to interpret. Our scientists could only access the surface information." Kelly took the container, staring at the softly glowing crystal inside. "What makes you think we can read it better?" "Because it responds to your presence," Vextal explained. "Its energy signature altered the moment you entered this room. It was designed for you, perhaps as a message across time." High Elder Zivor stepped closer. "Our histories say that humans possessed ways to preserve knowledge through generations. Memories encoded into your very being, waiting for the right moment to awaken. Genetic memory is just a theory," Wright protested, though she sounded uncertain. "Perhaps," Zivor said, "but theories often become facts when necessity demands it." A sudden alert sounded from Trelzar's console. The defense coordinator's posture stiffened as he studied the readings. "Multiple energy signatures detected at the edge of the void zone," he reported, his voice tense. Movement patterns match historical records of swarm behavior. Kelly turned to face the Zalarian leaders, his decision already made. Our fleet will move to investigate and, if necessary, reinforce the containment zone. Captain, Pierce cautioned, we don't have sufficient information. What we have, Kelly interrupted, is a debt that spans 2,000 years. If our ancestors gave their lives to protect this region of space, we won't dishonor that sacrifice. Now. He held up the crystal container, watching its light pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat. Besides, he added quietly, I think we're about to get all the information we need. Captain Kelly stood on the bridge of the Intrepid, watching as his crew prepared for what might become the most important mission of their lives. Earth Command had responded to their urgent message with surprising speed. Admiral Carl Dawson's weathered face filled the main view screen. The Joint Chiefs have reviewed your report, Captain, Admiral Dawson said, his expression grave. The historical records match fragments in our own archives. We believe the Zalarian account is accurate. Kelly felt a mix of relief and dread. Part of him had hoped Earth would dismiss the threat as exaggerated. Your orders, sir? Primary directive is to investigate the activity in the containment zone. Secondary is to reinforce the barrier if possible. The 7th and 9th fleets are already en route to your position, but they're 4 days out. And if the swarm has already broken containment, the Admiral's pause was telling, then you do whatever is necessary to protect the Zalarian system until reinforcements arrive. The memory crystal may provide tactical advantages. Dr. Olivia Rivera is the foremost expert on neural interfaces. I'm transferring her to your command. The screen split to show a woman with serious eyes and dark hair, pulled back in a practical style. Captain Kelly, I've been studying the preliminary data you sent. The crystal appears to be a form of neural storage device, designed to interface directly with human brain patterns. Interface how, exactly? Kelly asked cautiously. It would temporarily link with your neural pathways, allowing access to stored information, possibly including memories from the original user. Commander Pierce stepped forward. Are you suggesting Captain Kelly should allow an unknown ancient device to connect to his brain? The risks are significant, Dr. Rivera admitted. But so is the potential knowledge gain. According to my analysis, the crystal contains tactical data about the swarm, weaknesses, behaviors, possibly even weapons designed specifically to combat it. Kelly considered the options. Every minute they debated, the situation at the containment zone could be deteriorating. How soon can you arrive, Doctor? I'm already on the USS Washington. We'll reach your position in 6 hours. We'll be ready. Kelly turned back to Admiral Dawson. Request permission to move the fleet closer to the containment zone perimeter. If the swarm breaks through, we need to be in position. Permission granted, but Kelly, the Admiral's voice softened slightly, don't engage unless absolutely necessary. Your 37 ships won't be enough if the historical accounts are accurate. Understood, sir. As the communication ended, Kelly turned to his bridge crew. Lieutenant Wright, coordinate with the Zalarian Defense Forces. I want their ships incorporated into our formation. Lieutenant Mason, prepare tactical scenarios based on the historical battle data. Commander Pierce, you have the bridge. Where will you be, sir? Pierce asked. Meeting with our guests. If we're going to defend their world, we need to know everything. They can tell us about what we're facing. In the Intrepid's conference room, Vextal, Trelzar, and several Zalarian scientists had assembled a makeshift research station. Star charts and sensor readings covered the displays. Captain, Vextal greeted him. We've been analyzing the containment zone barrier. It's an incredible feat of engineering, a self-sustaining energy field that has maintained integrity for 2 millennia. But it's weakening now, Trelzar added, pointing to fluctuating patterns on one screen. These energy spikes indicate something testing the barrier from inside. Kelly studied the readings. How much time do we have? The Zalarians exchanged glances. Difficult to say, Vextal admitted. Hours, perhaps days, not longer. And what? Do we know about what's inside? Numbers, capabilities? Trelzar brought up a historical projection. According to the records, the swarm isn't a single entity but billions of semi-autonomous units that function collectively. They can form vessels, weapons, or spread out like a cloud to envelop targets. They consume technology and biological material, Vextal continued, adding each conquest to their mass and intelligence. The longer they're contained, the more desperate they become. The door opened and Officer Ford entered with a troubled expression. Sir, we've finished analyzing the long-range sensor data. There's something you need to see. Kelly followed Ford to a side display where a series of images appeared. Grainy, but distinct shapes moving within the containment zone. We enhanced the resolution as much as possible, Ford explained. These were taken over the past 6 hours. The images showed massive, shifting structures that seemed to flow like liquid, but maintain cohesive form. Some resembled starships, others were shapes that defied easy description. All were moving in coordinated patterns toward the barrier's weakest points. They're organized, Kelly noted. Intelligent. Yes, sir. And this is what concerns me most. Ford highlighted a particular section where the barrier glowed brightest. They're concentrating their efforts here, directly opposite the Zalarian home system. A chill ran through Kelly. They know we're here. Not just that, Vextal said quietly. They're specifically targeting the route to your most populated worlds. Kelly's communicator signaled an incoming message from the bridge. Kelly here. Captain. Pierce's voice came through. The Washington has arrived ahead of schedule. Dr. Rivera is requesting permission to come aboard immediately. Permission granted. Have her meet us in Science Lab 1. Kelly turned to the others. It's time to see what's in that crystal. Science Lab 1 had been converted into a secure testing facility. Dr. Rivera, a compact woman with efficient movements, was already setting up her equipment when they arrived. Captain, she acknowledged without looking up from her work. I've prepared the interface system. It will allow controlled access to the crystal's contents while monitoring your neural patterns for any adverse reactions. Kelly eyed the complex array of machines. How does this work? You'll sit here. Rivera pointed to a chair surrounded by sensors. The crystal will be placed in this containment field, and I'll initialize the connection sequence. The interface should establish gradually, first static images, then more complex data. If at any point you feel discomfort, we terminate immediately. And the risks? Rivera met his gaze directly. Neural overload, temporary memory disruption, possibly even personality alterations if the stored patterns are strong enough. But given what we're facing, calculated risks are necessary. Kelly nodded, then turned to Commander Pierce, who had just entered. If anything happens to me, you have command. Your priority is protecting the Zalarian system until reinforcements arrive. Sir, Pierce protested. Protocol suggests the first officer should undertake experimental procedures. Not this time, Commander. Kelly's tone left no room for argument. This mission needs continuity of command more than it needs me handling neural downloads. As Kelly took his seat in the interface chair, Dr. Rivera began calibrating the equipment. Vextal approached, holding the crystal container with reverence. Our scientists believe this was created by someone of great importance, he said as he carefully transferred the crystal to the interface device. Perhaps the same Admiral Bennett mentioned in the final transmission. The crystal pulsed brighter. As it got closer to Kelly, its glow synchronizing with his heartbeat. Neural resonance already establishing, Rivera noted with surprise. The compatibility is higher than anticipated. Kelly gripped the arms of the chair as the interface activated. The room around him seemed to fade as the crystal's light intensified. Connection stable, he heard Rivera say, her voice sounding distant. Beginning data transfer. At first, there was only a gentle pressure behind his eyes. Then images began to flash through his mind, star maps, battle formations, faces of men and women in outdated uniforms. Knowledge poured into his consciousness, too fast to process consciously. Then a voice clear and commanding. To those who come after, I leave this record. I am Admiral Eleanor Bennett, Earth Defense Force. The enemy we face was created to destroy humanity, but in containing it, we discovered its true purpose. Kelly gasped as the full truth of the swarm's origin and purpose flooded his mind. The others watched in alarm as his body tensed and monitoring equipment began flashing warnings. His neural activity is spiking, Rivera reported, fingers flying over controls. Should I terminate? Wait, Pierce ordered, watching Kelly's face. He's trying to say something. Through gritted teeth, Kelly managed 3 words before losing consciousness. They're coming back. The bridge of the Intrepid hummed with tense activity as Captain Kelly returned to duty. 24 hours had passed since his encounter with the memory crystal. His uniform was crisp, his posture straight, but those who knew him well could see the new weight in his eyes. He carried knowledge now that no human had possessed for thousands of years. Status report, he ordered, taking his command chair. Commander Pierce moved to his side. The containment barrier is failing in multiple sectors. Zilarian long-range sensors detect massive energy buildup inside. The swarm is preparing to break through. Kelly nodded. He had expected this. What about our reinforcements? The 7th Fleet reports they've pushed their engines to maximum. Estimated. Arrival is now 16 hours. The 9th Fleet is 20 hours behind them. Too long, Kelly said quietly. The barrier will fail within 4 hours. Lieutenant Wright looked up from her station. Sir, how can you be so precise about the crystal? Kelly interrupted. It contained more than data. It held the experiences of Admiral Eleanor Bennett, the woman who created the containment system. I know how it works now. I know when it will fail. The bridge fell silent as everyone absorbed this information. Sir? Ford spoke up from communications. The Zilarian High Council is requesting your presence. They've assembled an emergency session. Kelly stood. Commander Pierce, prepare the fleet for battle. All ships to take positions according to Formation Delta. Lieutenant Mason, I want the new weapon specifications Dr. Rivera extracted from the crystal implemented immediately. Yes, sir, Mason replied, though his expression showed concern. But our tests show the modifications are highly experimental. We can't guarantee they'll function as they'll work, Kelly said with absolute certainty. I've seen them work. Before. Pierce gave him a sharp look. Sir, you mean you've seen the simulations? Kelly met her gaze steadily. That's not what I mean, Commander. Before Pierce could respond, Kelly was moving toward the turbo lift. I'll be at the Zilarian Council. Keep me informed of any changes at the barrier. In the Grand Assembly Hall of Zilara Prime, representatives from every colony and allied species had gathered. Fear was palpable in the air as Kelly took the speaking position offered to him. Captain Kelly, High Elder Zivor began. Our scientists confirm the containment. Barrier is failing. What can you tell us about what will happen when it does? Kelly surveyed the anxious faces before him. 2,000 years ago, humanity fought a war against an enemy engineered specifically to destroy us. The swarm was created as a weapon by a species called the Viridians, a species that no longer exists because their creation turned against them. Murmurs spread through the hall. The swarm was designed to be attracted to human neural patterns. That's why our ancestors isolated Earth and established the containment zone, to protect the rest of the galaxy by removing the very thing the swarm hunted. Then why have you returned? Someone called out from the assembly. Because it was time, Kelly answered simply. Admiral Bennett's final plan is now clear to me. She knew the swarm couldn't be contained forever. She knew humanity would eventually need to confront it. So she left us the knowledge we would need when that day came. Vextal stepped forward. What knowledge, Captain? The swarm's weakness. Kelly activated a holographic display showing technical schematics. Its units communicate through a quantum field that mimics human thought patterns. That's how it tracks us. But that same connection can be turned against it. Dr. Rivera joined him at the podium. We've modified our ship's deflector arrays to generate a disruptive field that targets this quantum connection. In theory, it should break the collective intelligence into disconnected units. In theory? Counselor Mirazen questioned skeptically. The technology has never been tested against the swarm, Rivera admitted. But the principles are sound, Kelly's communicator signaled. Captain, this is Pierce. The barrier is collapsing faster than predicted. First breach is expected within 30 minutes. The hall erupted in panic. Trelzar shouted for order as Kelly turned to Zivor. Elder, your people need to activate planetary defenses now. Our fleet will engage the swarm directly, but some units may get through. Ziver nodded solemnly. It will be done. What else can we do? Pray, Kelly said quietly, that Admiral Bennett was right. Back on the Intrepid, Kelly took command as the ship moved into position. The human fleet of 37 vessels formed a barrier between the failing containment zone and Zalara Prime. Behind them, Zalarian defense ships took secondary positions. Barrier collapse imminent, Wright reported, her voice steady despite the danger. Multiple swarm constructs detected, preparing to exit. All ships, this is Captain Kelly. Initialize modified deflector arrays and prepare to engage on my mark. Remember your training and trust your instincts. He paused, then added, Humanity once stood here to protect this sector. Today we honor that legacy. The view screen showed the containment barrier shimmering, its energy field fluctuating wildly, before sections began to dissolve entirely. Through the gaps poured the swarm, billions of tiny metallic units forming into massive ship-like structures. Energy weapons charging on all swarm constructs, Mason reported. They're targeting our fleet specifically, ignoring Zalarian positions. As expected, Kelly said. All ships, activate quantum disruptors and fire at will. The space between the fleets lit up as the human vessels fired their modified weapons. Beams of blue-white energy struck the leading swarm constructs. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then the massive forms began to lose cohesion, their perfectly synchronized movements becoming erratic. It's working, Wright exclaimed. Swarm units are losing collective control. But the victory was short-lived. Other swarm constructs adapted, shifting their configuration to shield their quantum connections. They're learning, Rivera said from her station. Just as the records warned, we need more power to the disruptors. Divert power from life support. If necessary, Kelly ordered. Everything we have. The Intrepid shuddered as a swarm energy beam struck its shields. Throughout the fleet, ships reported similar hits. The swarm was focusing all its attacks on human vessels, drawn by the neural patterns that had eluded it for thousands of years. Shield failure on the Harrison and Galileo, Ford reported grimly. They're moving to secondary positions. Kelly studied the tactical display, watching as the swarm pressed its advantage. A plan formed in his mind, or perhaps it had been there all along, placed by Admiral Bennett's memories. All ships, new formation, he commanded. Pattern Omega. Focus disruptors on these coordinates. He sent targeting data to the fleet. Commander Pierce studied the new formation with surprise. Sir, that puts the Intrepid at the center of the swarm's main force. I know, Kelly confirmed. Exactly where we need to be. As the fleet repositioned, the Intrepid plunged directly toward the largest swarm construct. Enemy fire intensified, hammering the ship's shields. Shields at 30%, Mason warned. 20%. Hold course, Kelly ordered. Dr. Rivera, prepare to activate the neural pulse on my mark. Rivera's fingers flew over her console, programming the untested weapon Admiral Bennett had designed 2 millennia ago. Ready, Captain. The Intrepid shook violently as more hits landed. Warning alarms blared across the bridge. Now, Doctor. A pulse of energy radiated from the Intrepid, different from the disruptor beams. This energy was almost invisible, detectable only as a ripple effect as it passed through the swarm constructs. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, throughout the battlefield, the swarm began to turn upon itself. Units attacked other units, constructs fired upon allied constructs, and the once perfect coordination dissolved into chaos. What's happening? Pierce asked in amazement. The pulse contained Admiral Bennett's final solution, Kelly explained, watching as the swarm tore itself apart. A virus coded to human neural patterns, the very thing the swarm was designed to seek out and absorb. It's consuming the virus, which is rewriting its primary directives. The battle continued for hours, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. By the time the reinforcement fleets arrived, the swarm had been reduced to scattered non-functional units that could be safely contained and studied. 1 month later, Captain Kelly stood again in the Zalarian Council chamber, this time to receive their highest honor for service. The metal felt heavy against his chest. What will you do now, Captain? Vextall asked as the ceremony concluded. Kelly looked out at the assembled representatives of dozens of species, all of whom now knew humans were not myths, but guardians who had returned when needed most. Build bridges, he said simply. For 2,000 years, humanity isolated itself to protect the galaxy. Now it's time to rejoin it. As the Intrepid prepared to depart for Earth with news of their victory, Kelly took one last look at Zalara Prime from the viewport. The memory crystal sat on a shelf in his quarters, its glow now dim, its purpose fulfilled. Humanity had returned to the stars not as conquerors, but as protectors, just as their ancestors had intended all along.